Are you trying to go to the clinic?
Yeah.
It's closed.
What happened?
I mean, the USAID funding has been frozen, so they're closing down clinics.
I don't know what to do. Serious.
Somalia. They've been receiving development aid. This is separate from humanitarian aid for at least 43 years from U.S. taxpayers, and we have been the single largest donors to aid in that nation. And I'm sure that after nearly half a century of U.S.-funded economic development, they actually have a developed economy. Wouldn't you think?
Well, today, guys, I want to bring you a really interesting story on the reality of foreign aid and just how useless it is. Because as we speak, the nation of Somalia and others on top of them are currently facing an economic crisis ever since USAID was closed down and abolished. Economic ministers are warning of tax revenues going down, economic production stalling, and many vital services no longer being available to the people. And of course, liberals are using this as a pretense to say, see, this is why the USAID cuts were bad. Trump is so cruel. Look what we're doing to the impoverished nations. We're making them poor again. But of course, that is very shallow thinking. If you think about this on a much deeper level, you have to start asking serious questions. How exactly is it that simply shutting down USAID, which Democrats told us is not a big deal, it's not even a major part of the budget, suddenly has such a dramatic impact on some of these third world economies? Folks, I'm 22 years old. And for my entire life, ever since I can remember, the United States has been giving endless foreign aid to Somalia. And you older folks, I'm sure that goes back way deeper than that. And yet you look in 2025, what have they built because of that? Have they developed one step forward? Have they accomplished anything as a result of it? No. Because the simple reality is that foreign aid doesn't work. Whether you want to look at this from the optimistic or pessimistic perspective, the conclusion is still the same. It was long overdue to cut that foreign aid. Let's start with the pessimistic one. On one hand, you could look to history and say that Somalia has never really been a functional country. Therefore, it's not going to magically change or become Wakanda overnight simply because you gave them some money. So therefore, the foreign aid is useless and is a waste of taxpayer dollars. That, I'd argue, is a solid case to be made. But on the flip side, you could be an optimist and say maybe Somalia can have a future, but clearly, as you can see, the reliance on foreign aid was creating complacency. They weren't building anything because of it. And in order to, you know that famous slogan about teaching a man to fish? In order to move them forward as a country, you're actually going to have to let them walk on their own 2 feet, push them out of the house so that way they stop, sitting around essentially and building something for themselves. Nonetheless, guys, I want to bring you this story here today. Again, very, very interesting. And highlight some of the greater realities of what is happening currently geopolitically in Africa as a result of the USAID cuts that, again, does not make the case that liberals might think. Okay, and that said, let's get into this reporting here from Reuters. As you can see, USAID cuts have had a, quote, severe impact on Somalia's economy, according to the development bank chief. Again, how is it that your economy was that reliant on USAID that you basically shut down without foreign aid? Again, not very sustainable to me. And look, as I repeat, if this was going on for like 5 years, even 10 years, and it was a slow, gradual graduation process to get them on their own 2 feet, fine. It's very obvious to me, and it should be obvious to anyone what was going on. This whole thing was a grift, right? It's no different than in the United States in regards to things like EBT or Section 8. Right? Essentially, these are programs that incentivize poverty. Because, for example, if you make over $40,000, you get cut off from those programs. If you get married and have a joint income, usually you lose a lot of the government benefits. And so we have an incentive structure for people to keep receiving the free money, quote unquote, and staying poor. Right? Same reason why a lot of welfare recipients are like, okay, what incentive do I have to get a job or move myself up in life? Because then I'm going to lose the free money. It's much easier to basically sit around, do nothing, and be subsidized. Well, turns out that there is more than one example of this. This applies both to domestic policy and foreign policy. Again, teach a man to fish. Here's the story. The closure of USAID earlier this year has hit Somalia's economy and tax revenues, the head of the country's development bank said on Tuesday. Quote, in Somalia, it really impacted our GDP, said Hodan Osman, president of the Somali Development and Reconstruction Bank, and he told that to the Financial Times Africa Summit in London on Tuesday. She said that aid cuts had reverberated in the economy in ways the authorities didn't expect, hurting economic activity and impacting sales tax revenue for the government. Well, first of all, at least I got told that, for instance, the USAID stuff was mainly for like humanitarian issues. So they were funding hospitals and, water, free water programs, clean water, things like that. How is it then that the economic activity as a result of this is that severe, right? Sales tax revenue? They told me I was a conspiracy theorist for simply thinking USAID was giving out a bunch of money for people to spend. So again, I ask, how can that be the case? And again, I ask, what were you thinking making your economy so reliant on something as unsustainable as foreign aid? Furthermore, though, part of me has to also question the Somali authorities, although, I'm not denying that this is true, but at the same time, you do have to wonder how much of that USAID money was going back directly into the pockets of like the foreign leaders, right? These corrupt foreign governments that very often get aid money from the United States and other Western nations and then basically embezzle it, spend it on themselves, and now that money is being cut off. I don't know. I'm not accusing her of that. I'm just saying, definitely a question we have to ask, right? So the U.S. President Donald Trump has slashed the country's foreign aid budget and shuttered USAID earlier this year. The agency had supported health, education, and development worldwide. Well, again, so we're building some hospitals here. How is it that in the course of like 3 decades, they never became sustainable on their own? They never set that up, right? Education, okay. So we were educating people for several decades. Why didn't they take their education and build a functional country? I really wonder why that would be the case. Development worldwide, okay. Again, why haven't they developed? It's actually quite a simple question. Why have they not developed? Okay. Anyways, this Minister Osman said the country faced a broader economic hit, saying, quotes, it also had a severe impact just on the economy alone that we weren't really thinking about, she said. Well, why weren't you thinking about it? Yeah, it's almost like your entire economy was reliant on our money and you were basically grifting, right? And look, do I necessarily blame the foreign countries? To be honest with you, no, I don't. Because it's not their fault that America or a foreign country is like, free money, free money. I mean, if a country came to the United States and said, hey, you want to just give out a bunch of checks to all your citizens, or do you want us to build your roads for you? I'd say, then there's no catch to it. It's just like free. Yeah. I mean, why would you say no to that, right? It's like someone going out in public and just giving out money to people. Are the people going to say no? The fault is of the idiotic, as I've been saying, as I've been referring to it as, right, like suicidal empathy of liberals who feel this exact way. New York Times this week has also reported about a Somali hospital that closed after the U.S. aid cuts. Apparently, the fired employees are reopening it without pay. So look, do I like to see hospitals closed? No, I absolutely don't. But first of all, I don't think it's ever been the duty of the United States to say, hey, let's make sure Somalians have hospitals, okay? We look at the health problem in our country, right, in terms of insurance. I would actually respect the Democrats, for instance, if they had an honest conversation, right? Okay, so they want to have free healthcare and stuff like that. But if they came to the people and said, therefore, like, we should be spending money on our own citizens, and that's why we support free healthcare. Not, again, the suicidal empathy of, let's just give like trillions of dollars to everyone and then like expect that system to be sustainable, which it is absolutely not. And I asked even to this hospital, right? Why did you never have a plan set up so that way you could like run it sustainably on your own? But anyways, in the first week of July, by the way, just a couple months, right? So this also suggests it's not like they had any holdover funds or, they were doing something for themselves and the U.S. was just sponsoring it. No, the USAID here was the entire reason this hospital even existed for many years. Totally broken system, right? What are you guys doing? Well, of course, again, teach a man to fish. In the first week of July, the staff members at this Suka Xula, whatever, Center for Mothers and Children, closed its front doors and had to lock the gate. Funding from the United States, which paid for salaries and medical supplies, had been cut by the Trump administration, and the aid organization that managed the hospital fired the doctors, midwives, and other workers. So it's like, first of all, the salaries. So I don't know if they're giving out healthcare for free, but someone has to. Why does the U.S. have to pay for this, right? Either their government should be sponsoring this, or better yet, privatize it and charge people for healthcare. It doesn't have to be exorbitant. You can try to be charitable. It isn't kind of nonprofit work after all. But again, the salaries were coming from USAID. We're just paying people's salaries, right? Is that what we voted for when we went to the ballot box in any given election? Hey, we want to pay the salaries of workers in Somalia. Hey, what about the salaries here, right? Again, I don't support like liberal or socialist economics, but there's a strong argument to be made. You could literally give out a lot of benefits programs to Americans if you stop funding crap like this. But again, that's something the Democrats don't understand, hence why their kind of progressive economics always fails here. Anyways, apparently they reopened the hospital a few days later and they're working without pay or something. I mean, hey, just set up your own incentive structure, right? I mean, it's not, I'm glad to see, hey, you guys are committed to it. You're reopening the hospital. Okay, figure out a way to privatize it. That's all I got to say about this. But anyways, that said, if you still do not buy some of the arguments I'm personally making about foreign aid, let's allow people from Africa to tell you about that itself, right? The grift that is going on here, how a lot of the money, frankly, just gets stolen. That's a common epidemic. But even in the cases where it doesn't, right? The way in which foreign aid is actually not beneficial to people. So take a listen and let this be said about the importance of USAID closing, not just for America and our taxpayer, but also for the African countries themselves. I'm just saying.
Now, your book confronts this white savior complex head on. There is this ignorance that Africans cannot do it themselves. If they're too poor, they don't have the training, they need us. How do you think Western aid has either intentionally or unintentionally kept Africa poor?
In so many ways, Western aid has kept us poor. And I'll start with the first one. For me, which is the biggest problem, is that it's been masking the real problem. Right? So when you see that we're needing so much because economically speaking, we are quite weak, and then your solution is we're going to give a fish. When you're doing that, you are not only not addressing the root cause of this problem, which is poverty. And on top of that, what you are doing is that in your pursuit of bringing the free fish, you're putting real fishermen out of work. So just follow that trail. You're going to give this person a fish today to be fed, and then tomorrow what happens? What is going to change in this life of this person? In the process, you have taught this person dependency. He or she is going to wait for you to come the next day and feed them again. And on top of that, the fishermen who are there, you're putting them out of work because who can compete against free? And then what you're doing is you have more people now lining up for more free fish because at least the ones who could provide for themselves because they were real fishermen, you have taken them out of a job. So now they're also lining up looking for handouts because you took away their livelihoods.
I can tell you right now, the majority of African leaders, and not just African leaders, but leaders in the developing world, are celebrating the exit of USAID. If you think about it, their sole purpose, for example, filling in the gaps in healthcare and education. Where is the change? Show me one country that USAID was in and education improved. Show me what country where USAID was in and healthcare improved. The social services they're bringing, it's peanuts. The American taxpayer needs to know the billions of dollars that are being given to USAID, a fraction is making it to the people.
Yeah, well, again, I mean, it's pretty common sense. It's basic concept of dependency, right? You make people dependent on things, they get lazy, they don't build anything for themselves, right? You can even observe this in nature. It's the exact reason why if you take like a wild predator and put them in a zoo, first of all, even their physiology changes because they're caged up. But then the zookeepers have a rule. You can't release them back into the wild once they've been domesticated because they're just going to die because they no longer really have the ability or knowledge or capacity to go out and actually like fight and fend for themselves. And ultimately, you see that in your life as well, right? Look at the children, for instance, usually, not in all cases, but oftentimes, right? The trust fund babies, the kids who are born into wealthy families, they don't have work ethic. They don't really fight or try. Why? Because everything's handed to them, right? So, maybe in their case, it's fine because they're already doing well. But yeah, if you do that to someone who has very little, you do that to a poor country, what do you expect to happen, guys? It's not really that complicated, right? And before we get into this, I also want to address the argument of soft power, because this is the defense some Democrats and some USAID supporters have made. It's not really about them. It's about America, like buying influence in Africa, and then the governments will be favorable to us, and therefore that's okay. Well, again, as the second lady pointed out, first of all, a lot of African leaders and world leaders kind of actually resent it because it comes off as imperialistic or colonialistic again. But even with that in mind, okay, soft power for what exactly, right? Because we've already admitted, guys, that we're keeping these countries poor. So when you say soft power, hey, we might need that country for leverage or something like that, or maybe they'll be an ally or they do economics with us. Okay, but they're poor. They're a non-functional country and you're keeping them that way. So soft power over what, right? Yes, I'm king of the dysfunctional places. Okay, very cool. Great for you, right? What does that benefit to us, actually? Having soft power, for instance, over like some random, like Zimbabwe or something when we're just keeping it poor, Maybe you can make the argument about Somalia just purely based on geography, for example, right? Because the ocean, a lot of the shipping and trade goes through there and stuff like that. Really doesn't affect a lot of American cargo, but fine. But even on that point of soft power in Somalia, I would argue, okay, so how did our soft power work out, for instance, with Captain Phillips, right? The very famous guy from the movie, who, that's a true story, by the way, right? Has it shut down pirating? Has it stopped the harassment of, a lot of Western cargo? I mean, nowadays the pirates aren't as common, but again, at the peak of our aid programs to Somalia, it still happened. So what's the point of the soft power, right? Has that stopped the terrorists from, ruling half of Somalia? No, it hasn't. So shut up with a soft power crap. It's actually a really dumb argument. A lot of these like foreign policy wonks think it sounds smart, but it's not. If you have soft power over a place that is useless, then your soft power is useless. You understand that? And that's it. I want to close today's video with showing you a brief article from apparently the African country of Zambia, and what their president is saying and how actually the break with USAID has benefited the country. And this is from Amuse over on X. It's put together pretty well. And as you can see, right, USAID, what was it doing? It was stabilizing budgets, but also stabilizing low expectations. It builds clinics, but it also builds habits of dependency, political avoidance, and policy procrastination. Common sense, yes. The result is a paradox: the appearance of progress without the engines to sustain it. Zambia's recent response to U.S. aid cuts makes this point vivid. The president there, Hakainde Hichilema, called the shutdown of USAID operations. He's actually happy, this African president, long overdue. Not because he relishes the pain, because he sees what dependency does inside of a state. He insists that Zambia must take care of its own affairs. The immediate shock is real, but the long-term horizon is better. Saying the following. Said his country had to learn to stand on its own feet. Quote, it forces us to grow our economies and do the things we should have been doing. Adding that his mantra was seek ye growth as a way of raising the government's capacity to spend on social programs. And yeah, guys, again, it's pretty common sense. And frankly, props to at least one African leader for being honest with themselves. So there you go, guys. There you have it. That said, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.